Welcome to Pop Monster, a podcast to feed all your pop culture cravings. My name is Sarah, a self-confessed superfan. This show will cover everything from reality TV chaos, nostalgic deep dives, and the latest in music, TV, movies, and books. So let's get into it. We have made it to the end of Love Island UK. Together, we have witnessed 8 weeks of Aidan begging for kisses, Ellie reaching levels of angry Scottishness that has never been seen before, and Simba, a ridiculous man who has somehow, against all odds, become my favourite Islander of Series 13. I'm going to miss him most of all, but I have to confess that I am happy to be free and released from this show. Maybe it was the clash with the World Cup, maybe it was the lack of budget, maybe it was the slim pickings for male Islanders, but this series had the vibe of a winter season. It doesn't seem like it's made much of an impact, and I fear that it'll be quickly forgotten, and only a few of the Islanders will be remembered in the years to come. Let's hope and pray that Series 14 is a lot better, because I'm starting to get a little bit worried that we're kind of in the last days for the Love Island franchise, at least in the UK. Now, for me personally, this has been a very stressful week. My evidence for this is my constant binging of mini M&Ms and my even more disgusting binge of 2.5 Men. It's sexist, it's cheesy, and I'm obsessed. Now, I'm someone who doesn't ever agree with reality TV being described as a guilty pleasure. I consume it publicly with zero shame. But 2.5 Men, yeah, there's definitely an appropriate amount of humiliation associated with that. But regardless, I finished season 1 in 2 days, and I'm pretty close to finishing season 2 now. Alright, I don't want to delay any further, because for this final week, I am covering 8 episodes rather than my usual 6. So let's jump straight in. We begin with the episode that aired on Sunday, 19th of July, which features something I'm never emotionally prepared for: Friends and Family Day. And something I'm thankful for is that the thong bikini has gone down in popularity, because I find it so insane that the girls and boys have to meet their potential in-laws wearing swimwear. I cannot imagine a fate worse than this. I want all family visits to involve as many layers as humanly possible, and wish producers would let them change into actual clothing if they wanted to. And I have a question. I'm curious how all of your families would behave if you were on Love Island, because there's no way my family would ever appear on camera, and if they did, there's no way my mum would be all nice to some guy who has treated me like shit. She would have no mercy and would go off on him and would probably remain a meme until the end of eternity. But on these family visits, everyone is very cordial and understanding, and I don't know why I get so nervous for the Islanders, because there's never usually any drama. Although something I would love is a breakdown on how long each family gets to spend in the villa, because it really seemed like 20 minutes at an absolute maximum. First up, we have Yasmin and Tommy, who at this stage are probably the most stable couple in the villa. Now, something about me is that I love looking at people's childhood and family photos. I love going through photo albums with my partner's family, and always find it interesting to see the inheritance of features and who looks like who. So it's cute to see that Yaz is the absolute double of her auntie, and that Tommy looks just like his dad, who is basically Phil Tufnell. This was wholesome as hell and really gave me hope for these two working out long term. At this point, I would honestly have supported a Yaz win if I wasn't aware of all her predatory pyramid scheme nonsense, and don't even start me on Tommy. He is the definition of she's everything, he's just Ken. Something that killed me was learning that her grandparents have watched every single episode. What a supportive family. That's a dedication. They didn't even skip the heart rate challenge. Meanwhile, throughout this and absolutely everyone's family visits, Jasmine is such a marshmallow. She is bawling at all of the family reunions. She has definitely been exposed as a softie underneath that batty exterior. And with Yaz and Tommy's families, they have no doubt about their connection. They seem to love each other, and it was heartwarming. Their families were really working double time to try and secure them a place in the finals. Up next, we get to meet the families of Angie and Simba. Now, we've heard a lot from Simba about his mum, but like Lorenzo, I've always pictured him as a Cabbage Patch Kid. He's just such an interesting and weird enigma of a man that I find it so hard to imagine him having parents. And it just felt more natural to assume that he was hatched in a field. But I was proved wrong when we got to see his dad and brother, and clearly his mum would like to be removed from the narrative, and I don't blame her. We also got to see Angie's adorable mum and brother, and watching Angie be reunited with them was so emotional and hilarious. I always watch the show with subtitles on because there's a lot of regional accents going on, and throughout the section, all they said was wailing continues. Angelista has been put through hell and back during her time in this villa, so she badly needed to hug her mum. I was really happy that she got that comfort because she has been the one holding everyone up and drying their tears. It was her turn to get some care. And I did crack up at Simba's brother not even bothering to sugarcoat his behaviour, and he was right, it was chaos. Her mum does give Simba a bit of a grilling, and what the fish has now entered my lexicon, but I have to say he got off lightly and is lucky her mum is a soft touch. Angie's big brother also takes him for a sit down, and he's firm, but respects his sister's decision, so is pretty welcoming to him too. He did lose me when he told Simba not to let other people influence him. What has he been watching? Simba is a wild card who will always do what he wants to do. He's not weak-willed, and this isn't a Kevin and Aiden situation. Next, we have Mika's mum and gorgeous sister come in with two of Samraj's friends. Now, I have a probably unpopular opinion, and this is meant as no insult to the other families who all seem very loving and supportive and clearly were not here for scream time. But I really respected Samraj's family for not bothering to come here and for sending his mates in instead. I know I have my own issues, but to me that was relatable and appropriate family behaviour. Although it does feel like the stakes are a lot lower when you don't have to meet the parents. Also, did Mika's family actually fly all the way from Barbados? That is long haul, and there are no direct flights. What dedication to see Mika for a 20-minute reunion. Their family and friends love their coupling, so I think that this was a good morale boost for them since the public keeps putting them in the bottom. Now, this whole experience has cracked Samraj. This is the same man that we met on day one. He is not handling their lack of popularity well, and his friends are really trying to reassure him. And I am sympathetic to this. They have nothing but each other for their time in this villa. No family, career, music, TV, books. So I can understand his unhealthy fixation with the voting results. I do think that they might have genuine feelings for each other. I don't see it lasting for a minute outside the show, but I would say that's true for pretty much all the couples here. Okay, our next family visit is between Priya's mum and sister and Ethan's mum and friend. Poor Ethan. What is even the point of this? I don't know why it didn't clock to me until this moment that Priya's family would be meeting his family. This is so ridiculous, and I genuinely forgot that they were coupled up. Despite this, it was a very emotional reunion. We got to see Priya and her little sister, and this had me bawling too, and they really seemed to have a lovely relationship. All the girls were so welcoming, and it killed me when Priya's sister told Angie that she loved her bag, and Angie yelled in her face, "Okay, girl." I fear that throughout the show, we've barely seen a glimpse of Angie's full personality, and they've edited her down to the studs. So I'm excited to learn what she's actually like in the post-show interviews. Priya's family does like Aiden, and bless them, but those are famous last words. I will say that he is quite charming and gives a really warm first impression to her family. Now, I'm sure this may have been producer intervention, but it was awkward when Ethan's family joined Priya's. Although this is an awkward situation for Ethan, so I don't really know what else he was supposed to do under these circumstances. Priya does give a very genuine apology to Ethan's mum because she was upset watching her move on quickly with Aiden after taking a step back from Ethan. Honestly, I don't think this was necessary, but I completely get why this would be hard for a mum to watch. And Priya showed more remorse towards this family than any of the guys did who actually went wild in Casa. I also appreciated Samraj apologizing to Priya's mum, although it did bother me that he said it was for how he may have come across. He frustrates me, and I just know if I was Priya, my mum would have kicked him in the nuts. We close this episode with Yulia's mum and friend and Lorenzo's parents entering the villa. Now, I don't love myself, so bear with me, but I believe that in another lifetime, where I was perhaps 10 to 15 years older, I would be married to Lorenzo's bear-like dad. We all have our weak spots, so I initially thought that producers were going to try really hard to give these to the winners edit. But maybe at this stage they wanted to shift their attention to Yaz and Tommy, because we barely got to see them, their families interacting, and what we did get to see was pretty awkward. Which is probably due to them not being comfortable with all the cameras. But I still don't buy that Lorenzo is looking for anything serious, and I will be so impressed if they manage to stay together until they make it to the Mallorca airport. Okay, so Monday's episode picks up where we left off, and the final meeting is between Jasmine's family and the Murphys. We are introduced to Jasmine's hot mom and stunning sister Bella, who is the only family member whose name I bothered to remember because she is basically a bombshell at this stage. Representing the Murphy clan are Aiden and Cav's mum and Cav's twin sister. I was relieved to see how kind and welcoming Aiden and Cav's mum and sister were to Jasmine. I was happy that they left a dad who was liking mean comments about her at home. It's always awkward when the families get too involved in their socials. Just look at Alicia's dad. And Jasmine's mum has obviously been influenced by the TikTok edits and is ready to meet Lorenzo. Now, despite my reservations, the Murphy mum seemed like fun, and she rightfully dragged Aiden for being a dirty dog. Although it did feel like she seemed more interested in meeting Priya than Jasmine. When the time comes for Jasmine's family to meet Cavan, we have another soft touch mum, and she's very understanding about him being all over Charleen during Casa. I guess she just wants to support her daughter and doesn't want to make a scene on television. She'll be home in a week and they can talk to her then. We've learnt this from watching Love Island USA, with Melanie's family warning her about Sincere, and she ignored them. So yeah, that's probably a better conversation to have once you're back in the UK. Okay, we need to talk about Aiden. Jasmine's sister Bella pulls him for a chat, and what's wrong with him? Is he missing that part in his brain that gives him the ability to process shame? When the other villagers are watching him, they're all cracking jokes about him making a move on the sister. But I don't think any of them seriously considered that he would be that depraved. This had me thinking that maybe a lot of his weirdness and jealousy towards Cavan is due to seeing a girl as hot as Jasmine being into his brother but showing no interest in him. It's all a projection. And I will say that Bella would be a perfect addition to a future series of Love Island. She's gorgeous and has no filter, clearly, because she told Samraj that she DM'd his brother because people online were shipping them. When OG Free Boys, aka Aiden, Samraj, and Lorenzo get together for a debrief, Samraj reveals that he's having feelings of love towards Mika, and Aiden decides to reveal that he was trying his best not to chat up Bella and that he thought she was cute. Lord, give me strength. I feel like he's 80% joking, and it's not that deep, but the guy's a weirdo. I have to give it to him. At least he's bringing storylines to Love Island that we've never seen before, and the rest of this episode was a complete and utter snooze fest. The main events of this episode are the recoupling in which the girls are picking. It's the final week, so of course this was fairly predictable. The couples remain largely unchanged after the ceremony, so we have Mika and Samraj, Angelista and Simba, Yulia and Lorenzo, Yaz and Tommy, and Jasmine and Cavan. Bless Yulia, she was so nervous during her speech, and it feels like she's actually developed deeper feelings for Lorenzo. I think that she's genuine. Although I fear this is not a good idea with a man as unserious as Lorenzo. This relationship has already reached its limit, and as we see later, he can't handle any relationship talk or offer any security to her. His tactic is to distract her with kisses. Anyway, finally, Priya chooses to recouple with Aiden, meaning that Ethan has been put out of his misery and is now dumped from the island. They couldn't even be bothered to bring in a bombshell for him, and shots have been fired at people who have been pity voting. I'm glad that he's free from being the 13th wheel and unofficial team mascot for the Islanders. Maybe they'll give him another chance when it's time for All-Stars, because this year they dedicated more screen time to Cavan's stye. After the recoupling, Jasmine and Cavan call Aiden over to clarify his conversation with her sister. Now, since the dawn of time, I've been saying that I'm uncomfortable with the Murphy family boundaries. And maybe he means well, but I found it very sinister when Aiden told Jasmine that they will all make a very happy family. Oh, God, he's gonna try to shag her mum too. This man is wild, but he loved Bella's aura, and due to his evolution, he's proud that he didn't ask her for a kiss. Wow. I think even Ellie had a less humiliating experience during her time on the island. She can't even be spared being demoted to second or third best option when there's no longer bombshells entering the villa. This has got to be up there with Anton getting the phone number from that shopkeeper in Series 5. There is no love on this island, which must be why the producer's new agenda is to push Yaz's boring relationship to the forefront. We close this episode with Tommy 2.0 declaring his love for her, and I'm happy for them, but every time he speaks, I just hear that noise that the adults make when they're speaking in that Peanuts cartoon with Snoopy. It's reminding me of that priest in Father Ted, who has the most boring voice in Ireland. That's all I have to say on Monday's episode. Wow, I think that is the least I've ever had to say about any episode of Love Island in the series. And that is truly a testament to fuck all happening. With that, let's move on to Tuesday's episode, where things pick up with the Grafties. Naturally, because this is Love Island, they've somehow managed to stretch the awards ceremony over 2 episodes. For this episode, I have to dedicate a fair bit of time to the never-ending saga that is Priya and Aiden. My brain genuinely cannot comprehend Priya choosing to remain in this villa after the sheer amount of ridicule she's been put through. It's painful to watch. Aiden is absolutely repulsive, and while I'm still convinced Priya was doing a little bit of strategic grafting herself with this relationship, she somehow managed to get scammed by the scam. One thing I will give Jasmine credit for is that I think she genuinely learned something from movie night. She's clearly made a real effort to repair her friendship with Priya, and she tells her straight away about Aiden flirting with Bella and her concerns about the relationship. Now, to be fair, that's kind of the bare minimum I'd expect from a friend, but Jasmine made the catastrophic decision to tie herself to the Kent delegate and now has to spend every day enabling the Murphy family propaganda machine. If week 1 Jasmine could see herself now, I honestly think she'd self-eliminate, run straight back to Hector Bellerin, and refocus on her influencer career. I'm not someone who keeps a close eye on Islanders' follower counts, but with the show's popularity declining, I wouldn't be surprised if this cast hasn't seen anywhere near the boost contestants used to get. These aren't the Molly May days anymore. Later, Jasmine tells Cavan that if Aiden's flirting this much inside the villa, what on earth is he going to be like on the outside with even more women around? She questions how loyal he'll be in a relationship. Girl, respectively, look inwards. Maybe worry less about Aiden and more about the insecure little boy your couple dealt with. Cavan's head is going to be gone the second he attends his first freshers traffic light party. Now, the producers can clearly see this relationship dying in real time, so as one final attempt at resuscitation, they send Priya and Aiden off on yet another date. At this point, I genuinely wonder who holds the Love Island record for most dates in a single series, because Priya has to be climbing that leaderboard. She's been on 3 dates in the past week alone. They're treated to a little sangria picnic in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Some of these date locations are genuinely eerie. There's nobody around, the vibes are terrible, and it honestly reminds me of that final holiday Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt took before their divorce to try and save their marriage. Which isn't exactly the energy I'd want for a first date. Immediately, Aiden starts looking for reasons why Priya has somehow wronged him so that he's got an easy exit strategy ready to go. In absolutely no universe was Aiden more respectful or upfront with Alicia than Priya was with Ethan. The comparison is ridiculous. It honestly makes me feel ill imagining there are girls on the outside wanting a bit of Aiden Murphy. It's already baffling enough that someone as gorgeous as Priya has spent weeks being treated like an afterthought by this muppet-mouthed man-child. So hearing him talk about how she's brought out his inner lover boy, how comfortable he feels with her, and how he wants to continue things on the outside... Fake. This is all fake. And it doesn't even take long for everything to unravel. Within about 15 minutes of getting back to the villa, Aiden is already changing his tune. One conversation with Cavan is all it takes for him to absorb every single doubt his brother has about the relationship. Suddenly it's maybe we're more friends, maybe we're too similar, and maybe we're clashing. If everyone at Love Island HQ has a performance review after each series, I sincerely hope one of the action points is never cast siblings again. Also, Cavan can absolutely get in the bin with all this talk about Priya having a big ego. because she enjoyed having the attention of two boys. Funny how he never had those concerns when it was him or his brother juggling multiple girls. And why is he suddenly campaigning so hard for Aiden to date Jasmine's sister? This family is way too close and has clearly never heard of boundaries. It reminds me of this girl I went to school with whose dad's brother married her mum's sister. They had a baby and she used to call them her super cousin because they were related to her on both sides of the family. Look, technically, I guess it's not incest, but there are over 8 billion people on this planet. Branch out. The next morning, we get one of those classic Love Island gestures that the producers desperately want us to find adorable. Mika, Yaz, and Yulia decide to make breakfast for the boys, and to be fair, they actually put together a really lovely spread. But I would have loved if one of them could have covered the food before leaving it unattended outside. Even as a child, my mum had me terrified of flies landing on anything edible. Anyway, it's obvious the seeds Calvin planted have fully sprouted overnight. Those brothers barely share a brain cell between them. Suddenly, Aiden is questioning whether they have enough time left to get to where they need to be. Absolutely hate this Love Island obsession that every couple has to have reached the exact same stage before the final. Of course they're not as established as Samraj and Mika. They've only been together for a week or two. If Aiden actually wanted this relationship to work, they could continue getting to know each other outside the villa. They don't even live that far apart. If a man genuinely wants to make the effort, he will. He tells the boys that he wants deeper conversations with Priya, but every time they talk, she apparently just pounces on him. The audacity of Mr. Sloppy Kissbeggar acting like she's the one with no self-control. Besides, I refuse to believe that Aiden has ever participated in a meaningful conversation in his entire life. The man is an absolute moron. Meanwhile, Priya can clearly see Aiden, Calvin, and Samraj having an intense discussion about what an absolute car crash her relationship has become. So she's understandably getting nervous. When Aiden finally pulls her for a chat, he tells her he's worried that he doesn't have any deeper feelings or emotions towards her yet. Which is complete news to Priya because he's been telling her a completely different story. She even asks him whether he felt those emotions with Yaz, and he says he thinks he did. Bro, Yaz wouldn't even piss on you if you were on fire. I genuinely don't know what he expects Priya to do with this information if he's not actually planning to end things and leave the villa. He's basically asking her to sit around while he decides whether she's good enough. What a scrub. It's embarrassing enough that she's entertaining the idea of a relationship with him, but now she has to beg him for scraps? I've had enough of watching this woman get publicly dunked on every single episode. For her own sake, this should have been the moment she walked away. I will say though, thank God for Yulia. At least she had the decency to tell Priya about Aiden complaining that she bounces on him in bed. If Yulia hadn't been in that conversation with Calvin and the girls, I'm honestly not convinced anyone else would have told her. And that takes us to the Grafties, sponsored of course by the Boots Beauty Crew. What incredibly convenient timing. Where were you all season when poor Ellie was wandering around with that horrific foundation match and tear stains running down her face? Bit late now, Boots. In Tuesday's episode, we only get through 2 awards and immediately Jasmine looks absolutely terrified. I don't think it's just her relationship with Calvin that's dimmed her personality over the last few weeks. I genuinely think she's traumatized by how relentlessly production has targeted her during movie night and some of the other previous challenges. First up is the Flirtiest Performance Award. The nominees are Lorenzo, Aiden, and Mika. We first revisit Lorenzo's date with Alicia. My biggest issue with Lorenzo isn't even that he dismisses everything as banter. It's not even that he constantly mispronounces Yulia as Julia. It's the absolute confidence of wearing a vest while every other person there looks like they're attending the TikTok Oscars. Yulia is understandably annoyed seeing how over the top he was after telling her she was everything he'd been looking for. But to Lorenzo's credit, he actually handles the fallout better than most of the boys this season. He apologizes, doesn't get ridiculously defensive, and doesn't spend 20 minutes arguing semantics. The bar really is in hell, and I think this is what helps him get away with a lot of stuff. Next up is Aiden, and we all get to relive him flirting with Alicia. She must be delighted with the amount of screen time she's getting this episode. He parrots one of Jasmine's old excuses and claims he was just being tongue-in-cheek. And of course, his little wind-up toy Calvin immediately starts chirping up to defend his brother. Honestly, my least favourite Islanders this entire series are the Murphy brothers. I cannot stand either of them, and I really hope I don't have to see them come back again. Something I love is how Simba has somehow managed to rebrand himself as the reformed nice guy simply because he hasn't acted like a complete menace for about 2 weeks. Even he can understand why Priya was upset hearing Aiden describe Alicia as a breath of fresh air. Lord help us all if Simba is the biggest feminist among the boys this year. This is dire. The final nominee is Mika for that socially distanced twerk on Aiden. They were really scraping the barrel trying to find something that made one of the girls look bad. Losing Ellie and Finley clearly had a huge impact on the quality of the grafties. At least Samraj has learned from earlier in the series, and I absolutely loved his completely inadvertent assassination of Aiden when he told him that Mika sees him like a brother and isn't remotely attracted to him. But Simba, we need to study the fragile male ego. There is absolutely no way he genuinely believes Mika did anything wrong in this clip. He just still hasn't recovered from being rejected by her, and he'll take any opportunity to have a little dig. The winner is Aiden, who somehow watches all of that footage and says with zero shame that this was probably his least flirty moment in the filler. Ugh, just you wait. The second and final award we get to see in this episode is the Plot Twist Award. First up is Yulia for her detective work exposing the fraudulent Priya and Aiden relationship. I actually thought that was a really nice touch, pairing that with the next nomination, which showed Priya and Aiden talking about making the final together. Again, I have to say thank God for Yulia, because everyone else has spent the last week drinking the Kool-Aid and talking about how cute they are together. Hopefully she finally feels vindicated for calling this relationship out from day one, and I was hoping she'd give it a rest now, but we're not that lucky. Next up is Lorenzo, and we revisit him comforting Jasmine while she was crying over Cavan and Charleen. The fact that Cavan can watch Jasmine have a complete emotional breakdown over him, feel absolutely no guilt about causing it, and instead focus on Lorenzo joking that maybe they should try dating again in 6 months. This little boy is so used to being babied and casting himself as a victim. I desperately need Jasmine to wake up and realize how little consideration he has had for her feelings. Honestly, I've had enough of Cavan. Lorenzo absolutely buries him by bringing up Jasmine's mum and reminding everyone that even her ridiculously attractive mother thanked him for looking after her daughter and being such a good friend. The final nominee is Aiden, and we have to see another clip of him flirting, this time with Bella, Jasmine's sister, who has now officially won the award for family member with the most screen time. The fact that Aiden is still trying to defend and justify his behaviour. Listen to Simba, you're cooked. Priya is not having it and tells him that he's Aiden Murphy and he's not going to change. This man is not iconic enough to get full named. He's not Jason Derulo. I need Priya to listen to the girls, to her intuition, to the heavens above, to Craig David, and walk away from the troubles in her life. This is just embarrassing. Wednesday's episode picks up exactly where Tuesday left off with the grafties still somehow not over. There's still another 4 award categories to get through. But first, we have to crown the winner of the Plot Twist Award, which goes to Aiden. Sadly, he's the Adele of this year's grafties and is absolutely drowning in trophies by the end of the night. He gives what could only be described as non-apology, insisting the whole Bella situation was just a joke. Ugh, he's a joke. Let's move on. The next category is Raunchiest Moment, and the nominees are Priya and Aiden for their trip to the hideaway, and I was just not emotionally prepared to relive that comically oversized tent pitched in the middle of the bed again. Then we have Yulia and Lorenzo's sunscreen moment, which finally explains why production forced us to watch that painfully long scene in the first place. Next up is Aiden for that bizarre homemade dares game he played in the hideaway with Alicia and Finley. Once again, he falls back on the excuse that it was just a game. Aiden, who exactly do you think you're fooling? We all know this wasn't an official Love Island challenge. This was some unlicensed, homemade Etsy game with an even lower budget than usual. They didn't even have a breeze block to stick the dares cards in. The winner is of course Aiden. At this point, he's basically the only person in genuine contention for half these awards. It's been a relatively quiet year, Finley's long gone, and Simba hasn't pulled a madness for at least a couple of weeks. Next up is Most Dramatic Performance. The nominees are Simba, Priya and Samraj, and Jasmine. First, we get a compilation of Simba's greatest hits, storming away from Mika, arguing with Tommy Toon, and generally behaving like the theatre kid he was always destined to become. We've really come a long way because everyone is now laughing along with this montage like he's some adorable little scamp instead of the phantom menace that we know he is. Next, we revisit Priya and Samraj's infamous argument over the notes app full of her former love interests. You know the one, Samraj calls her embarrassing, Priya tells him to fuck off, and honestly, good for her. Samraj immediately gets back on his moral high horse, saying that nobody should be applauding someone telling another person to fuck off, and that men and women shouldn't speak to each other like that. Ugh, this drip. Priya was absolutely right. He is a melt. I'm one of the least confrontational people you'll ever meet, and even I don't think telling someone to fuck off is particularly extreme. I once said that to someone who tried convincing me that Toy Story 3 is the best film in the franchise. The audacity. They're lucky that's all I said. Our final nominee is Jasmine's dressing room rant after movie night. To be fair, nobody really comes for her over this one, and even Cavan backs her up. Honestly, her spirit has been crushed enough by this filler, and I think we should be giving people free passes for how they react after the Casa recoupling and movie night. The winner of this award is Simba, and frankly, he wins my heart too. I love a drama queen. At this point, I've got no option but to support him and Angie winning the whole goddamn thing. They're the only likeable couple left, and I actually think they have a decent chance of surviving for at least a month after the show. Next up is Most Emotional Performance. The nominees are Lorenzo, Simba, Jasmine, and Samraj. First, we revisit Lorenzo having complete emotional breakdowns after being forced to dump Tommy Toon, then Lola and Fitzy. The poor man simply isn't built for making difficult decisions. Then we have Simba performing Letter to Angelista. Honestly, we're thinking far too small by limiting this masterpiece to the Grafties. This could be Love Island's first Nobel Prize in Literature. Next, we have Jasmine crying over Cavan while Mika comforts her. During this, the camera cuts to Cavan so we can see his reaction, and someone asks him how he's feeling watching all of this unfold, and he just sits there with this completely blank, emotionless expression. He genuinely looks like the Michael Myers mask. I can confidently say this man feels absolutely no remorse for anything he's done. Our final nominee is Samraj and Simba crying together over the Angie situation. The less said about that, the better, and our winner is Lorenzo, and that's fair enough after production somehow made him personally responsible for sending about half the cast home. Finally, we reach the last category of the night. Keep my name out of your mouth. This was probably my favourite addition to the Grafties this year. I actually think we should make this a permanent category. I love the idea of pulling in clips from After Sun, dumped Islanders interviews. I would love it if they included Beach Hut confessionals. Although, this is probably going to encourage future dumped Islanders to become even more unhinged just to secure another 30 seconds of screen time. The first nominee is Charleen, saying she wishes she'd gone for Aiden instead. God help me. This year, we had the worst collection of Irish contestants Love Island has ever produced. I feel personally attacked. I've reached my limit with Charleen. Next, we have Alicia calling Priya the biggest game player in the filler and saying that her relationship with Aiden is completely fake. Poor Priya really is public enemy number one tonight. Can't we not give this woman a single evening off? Then we have Lola talking about Yulia calling her names and being performative, while Sean contributes absolutely nothing to the conversation. The man is basically a cardboard cutout throughout this entire clip. This also makes it very clear where Yulia sits in Yaz's friendship rankings because Yaz immediately jumps to Lola's defense. Finally, Charleen somehow manages to secure 2 nominations in the same category, and they could have skipped her first nomination and just shown this one. We really didn't need any more commentary about her wanting to couple up with whichever Murphy brother was currently available. This time, Charleen says she won't miss Mika after seeing her reaction to Cavan bringing another girl back from Casa. Yulia then starts pushing the narrative that all the Casa girls were victims after the recoupling. I'm sorry, this is such bullshit. These girls would have lasted approximately 12 seconds if Amber Gill had been in that filler calling people dead things. I actually agree with Jasmine here. It's wild that Charleen directs all of this energy towards Mika instead of Cavan, the actual man who treated her terribly. I genuinely can't listen to this conversation anymore. Charleen wins the award, Yulia applauds enthusiastically, and Mika accepts it on Charleen's behalf before trying to apologise and calm everything down. She's honestly a better person than me. After the ceremony, the drama continues as Aiden immediately starts arguing with Cavan. Aiden is such a baby-backed bitch. The fact he's angry that Cavan supposedly shared their private conversation about Bella instead of taking any accountability for his own behaviour is genuinely laughable. Firstly, there are no private conversations. You're on Love Island, there are cameras, and millions of people are watching. Secondly, I wonder if Aiden knows that it was Yulia who told Priya those comments rather than Jasmine, because I feel like he's assuming she's the source. To Cavan's credit, he actually stands his ground. He calls Aiden out for constantly trying to start fights with Jasmine and for joining in with this bullshit about the girls apparently laughing at Charleen and the other Casa girls after that recoupling. Then he delivers the line, "You're supposed to be my brother." Honestly, this is Shakespeare. Aiden then goes straight from fighting his brother to fighting Priya. I'm not even going to spend much time talking about that conversation because it genuinely gave me a rage blackout and wasn't good for my blood pressure. It's exactly the same cycle we watched with Yaz and him. He behaves badly, claims it was just a joke, then somehow convinces himself he's the victim because the woman has dared react to his behaviour. I genuinely think society will become a happier place once this series ends and we're finally free of the Murphy brothers. Before bed, he hugs Priya, they make up and he tells her, "I sympathise for you." Yeah, he keeps using the word sympathise, and even if we just ignore the poor sentence structure, I'm really not convinced he knows what that word means. And I have to give Yulia her flowers for trying to produce some good television. But in this particular situation, she's the problem. She would be an absolute nightmare to live with. Before Yulia arrived, there really wasn't that much conflict between the girls. Obviously, they weren't perfect. Look at the way Priya's been treated all season. But overall, they felt like quite a supportive group, especially compared with the full-scale warfare we got last year. Oh, sorry, I need to take a quick sidebar. And I would like to discuss Priya's comments about Alicia needing to focus on National Rail. It came across slightly classist to me, although maybe I'm being unfair and she genuinely meant Alicia should focus on doing her actual job. Either way, National Rail is a perfectly respectable career. Probably comes with a decent pension and perks too. National Rail, call me. At least Aiden picks up a shift and becomes a union representative and jumps in to get Priya back on the side of the working classes. Anyway, this Yulia and Jasmine feud. Well, how the turntables. Earlier this series, Yulia was on the receiving end of Lola's internalized misogyny, with all the anger that should have been directed at Fitzy instead landing squarely on her. And what does Yulia do? The exact same thing to Jasmine, because as we've seen time and time again, Yulia has absolutely no shortage of opinions. She just tends to save most of them for the women and any men who aren't Lorenzo. Later, we see Lorenzo pull Jasmine for a chat so they can reflect on their Love Island experience together, and he says he'd like them to remain friends after the show. This entire conversation screams producer intervention, but whatever. Meanwhile, Yulia watches from across the villa, looking increasingly uncomfortable. She says she trusts Lorenzo, but she's not so sure about Jasmine. Excuse me, what exactly is Jasmine supposed to have done? She's shown absolutely zero interest in getting back together with Lorenzo, and has probably landed herself on production's blacklist because she's repeatedly shut that storyline down. If anyone keeps joking about rekilling things, it's Lorenzo. Yulia really needs to slow her roll. Instead, she pulls Jasmine for a chat, and Jasmine is completely honest about the absolute nothing burger of a conversation she just had with Lorenzo. Yulia then starts saying she's worried Jasmine is still trying to get Lorenzo's attention, based on the affair clips and because Jasmine supposedly wasn't honest during the Priya and Jordan situation. Yeah, Lorenzo was the one who pulled Jasmine, and now Yulia is suddenly using Priya as some kind of proxy when, in reality, she's just jealous and has an issue herself. Please spare me the fake concern for poor innocent Priya. 5 minutes ago, you were calling her the biggest game player in the villa. Oh, Yulia, she honestly makes herself so difficult to root for. If she'd fully embraced being the villain, I'd actually respect it. Instead, she starts crying afterwards and tries to always turn herself into the victim, despite being the person instigating most of this drama. Meanwhile, Jasmine stays calm, keeps her composure, and absolutely runs rings around Yulia in that conversation. Which is probably why Yulia eventually has no option left but to be a crybaby. And Thursday's episode picks up exactly where Wednesday left off. At this point, it's become abundantly clear that love is well and truly dead this series. Even in the final week, the producers seem far more interested in breaking couples up than bringing them together. It's giving less Love Island and more Islander on Islander violence. Now, as someone who considers binge watching Vanderpump Rules the equivalent of a spa day, I say bring on the drama. At least Jasmine seems to have been given a THC gummy, or at the very least a beta blocker. She's completely fresh out of fucks, cannot be bothered to entertain this feud with Yulia any longer, and looks like she's counting down the days until the end of her prison sentence. Priya, however, she's still got some fight left in her. We start the episode with Priya pulling Yulia for a chat to settle, once and for all this talk about her supposedly fake relationship. Yulia has now changed her tune slightly. She says she believes Priya's feelings are genuine, but that Aiden is the one leading her on. And honestly, I do understand where she's coming from when she talks about how the original Islanders always stick together while the bombshells are treated as disposable. That happens literally every single year. The conversation actually ends pretty positively, but then Priya goes straight to debrief with Jasmine and Kevin, who immediately destroy any progress that was made by telling her Yulia was calling her a game player about 10 minutes before they sat down together. Which naturally leads to yet another dressing room argument. At this point, they honestly just need to agree to disagree. Yulia wants to defend her bombshell friends, while Priya isn't wrong when she says people naturally become closer to the Islanders they've lived with the longest. Eventually, Yulia breaks down in tears up on the terrace. Now, when Yulia first arrived, I genuinely thought she was misunderstood, but now she's kind of doing this to herself. I still think she's absolutely right that Priya and Aiden are scamming their way through this relationship, but she doesn't need to keep inserting herself into it. She can't act surprised that Priya reacts badly when this is now about the 9th time Yulia has decided to weigh in, and Priya has the same reaction every time. It's frustrating because the ingredients are all there for Yulia to become an all-time great reality TV fill-in. To reach that level, you need strong opinions and the confidence to stand 10 toes down in them, even if everybody hates you. That's why she'd probably be my number one if I didn't have to watch her cry every single time people push back. Maybe she's projecting because she can feel how distant Lorenzo has become. The man has shown more care and affection towards his pillow while lint rolling it before bed than he has towards Yulia. The next morning, Mika receives a text announcing today's challenge, Not Another Podcast, hosted by Maya Jama. Honestly, I knew we'd reached peak Love Island podcast saturation when I started one, but I actually appreciate production trying something different this close to the final. It's already miles better than that debrief with Yasmin, Shakira, and Tony. So each couple sits down with Maya to record a fake podcast, answering some fairly tame questions before moving on to the messier ones sent in by the public. I'll just run through some of the biggest takeaways. First of all, Aiden admits that if Yaz was still single, he'd absolutely be interested in giving things another go. And poor Priya just has to sit there smiling like an absolute mug. It was at this point that I accepted that she's never voluntarily leaving this relationship. She'd have to be physically escorted out of the villa. If it was all left to her own devices, I would be genuinely worried that she'd still be sitting in there when they launch next year's series and end up becoming the Villa Den mother or some kind of camp counselor. Next, Lorenzo is asked why he never seems to defend Yulia during any of her arguments. Honestly, I barely heard a word of his answer because I was too distracted by the fact that this man still keeps calling her Julia instead of Yulia. I don't find this funny or charming. Getting her name right is literally the bare minimum required for basic human decency. Now, my biggest shock of the entire podcast recording comes courtesy of Tommy 2.0. I am now 100% convinced this man had a girlfriend on the outside. Prince Andrew gave a more convincing interview. I'm simply not buying that he properly ended things before coming into the villa. Now, I can relate to him because I'm also a terrible liar. If I ever went in the traders, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind I'd be the first person banished. I just have one of those guilty faces. But somehow, even Britain's most boring man has managed to become another scamming fuckboy juggling two women. Honestly, I just want them to give the 50k to Angie and Simba now. I genuinely thought Tommy and Yaz were the strongest couple left, but I think I've been ignoring every red flag in front of me. They came dead last in the Knowing Me, Knowing You AHA challenge, and Tommy has all the charisma of a black hole. They finish the podcast with a game ranking the couples, although we don't actually get to hear everyone's answers until the evening's watch party, where we'll also get to compare their answers with the public vote. And I just have to say, I'd forgotten how much I enjoy Maya Jama. It was lovely actually getting to see her properly this episode, and it was great that she returned for the watch party. The first question was, which couple is the most fame hungry? Almost everybody chooses Yulia and Lorenzo, apart from Angie and Simba, who vote for Priya and Aiden. Naturally, Aiden takes offense, but honestly, I really respect Angie and Simba for doing whatever the hell they want. Simba can never be referred to as a sheep. He will continually go against whatever the boys or the girls are saying. He thinks this is a bandwagon, and as we will all remember, Simba has always been chief defender for the Bombshell Alliance. I'd really be interested to find out if he's going to stay friends with any of these people afterwards besides Angie and Ellie. The public results show that Yulia and Lorenzo are in third place, Mika and Samraj are second, and Priya and Aiden take first. To which Yulia says, "Thank you very much, amen," with a shit-eating grin. Everyone freaks out and tells Simba that these are the kind of comments that they've been putting up with in the dressing room. To which Simba replies with the line of the season, in my opinion, "I never said sis was perfect." I died laughing at this, especially with his hand gestures. I love this man so much. Next up is which couple is brushing red flags under the carpet. This time, literally everyone chooses Priya and Aiden, and yeah, the boy is one enormous walking red flag. The public agree, placing Yulia and Lorenzo third, Jasmine and Cavan second, and Priya and Aiden comfortably in first. I do have to say though, I absolutely love how unserious Jasmine and Cavan are throughout this challenge. If I looked that good on a massive cinema screen, I'd probably just spend the evening admiring how hot I look too. That's a glass half full way of looking at life. By this point though, the challenge does start feeling a little bit repetitive. Every question just circles back to Priya and Aiden or Yulia and Lorenzo. I was getting slightly exhausted listening to Priya explain why Yulia annoyed her in every single clip. I think Priya's right, and they are clashing because they're so similar, and they're both irritating the fuck out of me. The next question asks, which couple is most likely to split because one of them cheats? At least this one ignites some fresh drama, with Lorenzo saying he has very little faith in Jasmine and Cavan surviving on the outside. Honestly, I'm with him. She can do so much better. Simba also catches a fair bit of heat, although I don't really understand why some people were saying that he was the villa's only cheater. Cavan exists, and apparently Tommy 2.0 has a whole girlfriend waiting at home. The public vote places Yulia and Lorenzo in third yet again, and their title from now on is simply the Bronze Couple. Second place goes to Angie and Simba, and unsurprisingly, Priya and Aiden once again come first. Then we move on to which couple will be strongest in the filler but weakest on the outside. This one honestly felt a little pointless because it's basically just the previous question worded slightly differently. Once again, Lorenzo has plenty to say about the cracks forming between Jasmine and Cavan. Wow, this has given the Jazz-Renzo shippers an unbelievable amount of ammunition. The public result places Yulia and Lorenzo in third, of course, Angie and Simba in second, and Jasmine and Cavan in first. Finally, we reach the big question, which two couples are the least compatible? Among the Islanders, Priya and Aiden receive 5 votes, Yulia and Lorenzo get 3, Mika and Samraj receive 2, Yaz and Tommy and Jasmine and Cavan receive 1 vote, and none for Angie and Simba. The single vote that Tommy and Yaz receive comes from Angie and Simba, and suddenly Tommy is activated. Honestly, I think Simba hit the nail on the head when he said their relationship lacks depth. Meanwhile, Jasmine quietly tells Cavan that Tommy apparently broke up with his girlfriend just 2 weeks before entering the villa. And it doesn't seem like he told Yaz the full story. Yeah, I knew that Yaz was taken aback when she heard him say this, but was trying to save face. We end the episode with Maya revealing that the 3 couples receiving the most votes, Priya and Aiden, Yulia and Lorenzo, and Mika and Samraj, are now vulnerable, and it's time for the public to decide who stays. This spills over into Friday's episode when we get to see the result, but first we have a continuation of the feud between Yulia and the rest of the villa. After the podcast watch party, she is feeling like a victim due to the double standards, and everyone having issues with her saying Priya and Aiden are faking it when clearly everyone else feels the same. Yeah, I don't know about that. I feel like their issue isn't with Yulia's message, but with her delivery and for incessantly banging on about it. But at least she seems to be fed up with these people now and ready to focus her energy on Lorenzo. My silver lining that has come out of this whole situation is the budding friendship between Yulia and Simba. They're a match made in heaven and both absolute shitsters. But seeing Simba support her has everyone starting to panic about their alliances. It felt like I was watching Survivor, and I definitely think that Simba is a bit of a game player and definitely acts up for the cameras. But I don't think him supporting Yulia is due to him sensing that the public backs her. It seemed obvious to me that he's never fucked with the OG boy squad in the villa. I don't think he's making a big switch around. Just look at how he voted to save Chidi over Tommy. But this move has made the big OG voting bloc of the Murphys, Jasmine, and Mika and Samraj ready their defenses against any outside threats. I think that everyone here is game playing. Just look at the way that Lorenzo is encouraging Yaz and Priya to dead off their relationships, and then we later see him making a grand speech and wanting to exclusively date Yulia. Spare me. We all know that he'll only make her coffee as part of a brand partnership, still isn't pronouncing her name correctly, and just told Maya Jama that they didn't need to put a label on things. Okay, we need to get into Priya and her shit show of a relationship with Aiden. After sitting next to him for that fake podcast interview and listening to Aiden say that he'd run things back with Yaz if he had the option, she now has to think things over because she's the ultimate mug, and now everyone is starting to voice their doubts about the authenticity of this relationship. Samraj decides to grill Aiden in front of the boys about his feelings for Priya. Now, maybe I'm cynical, but I feel like the only reason Samraj is now doing this is because they're now their direct competition in the public vote. Before this, he was firmly rooted up Aiden's arsehole. But I love to see the boys fighting, and Cavan has to pipe up on Aiden's behalf because he feels like Samraj is coming for his brother. Oh, I pray that we never have to deal with siblings in the villa again. It creates such an awkward obstacle for the Islanders. It means that not everyone is on a level playing field. Just look at the way that Jasmine has had to remodel her own ethics system in order to support her potential brother-in-law's bullshit. Ultimately, they decide to drop this forced fake relationship under the guise of protecting their friendship. Perfect, as long as I don't have to listen to anyone debate this anymore. Some other relationships like Yaz and Tommy's have also been dealt some blows after this podcast challenge. I think she viewed him as a safe, reliable bet, but is now having some realizations due to his outside shadiness. Now, Tommy 2.0 is someone who reminds me a lot of Coachella. Something that is incredibly popular, but I just don't get the hype or the appeal. This guy looks like a stretched out Gary Barlow, although he doesn't even manage to match his charisma. In a boy band, Tommy would be shoved in the back and would be the one that your nan fancies. His consistently shifting stories are not adding up, and his girlfriend is definitely waiting for him on the outside. He tells Yaz that they split in December for a few months, but then actually properly ended things 2 weeks before he came in here, which would mean that he was still with her in June. He tries to tell Yaz that he loves her and that she's his person, but Yaz doesn't even have the energy to deal with him. She looks so fed up and is fully disengaging like Angie did with Simba. Yeah, I'd be shocked if these two even make it through the flight home. Later in bed, he tells her that his and his ex's split was mutual as fuck. I don't really understand these relationships, like every single one that Lucinda Stafford has been in, where they're happy for their partner to go on Love Island to boost their profile. Maybe they're hoping that the publicity and following will rub off on them too. Regardless, it's too late for Yaz to shake things up, so she's resigned herself to finishing off this experience with him. Next, the Islanders get a text, and it's time for them to enjoy their last supper. Now, I'm sorry, because I know I keep harping on about how great Love Island USA was, but this is reminding me of when they had that Chinese meal together. Then each couple's fortune cookie told them if they were going home or not. That was iconic. Now, as part of this special dinner, I loved seeing everyone getting fully dressed up, especially the boys, because they're normally looking a raggedy mess compared to the ladies. I also love seeing the drama of the boys all standing and waiting for the girls to come out, and they were all looking like supermodels. I was honestly taken aback when I saw Angie and Jasmine. Even Aiden almost broke his neck trying to check out his brother's woman. It was really making me nostalgic for those 90s and 2000s rom-coms when the guy stands there in awe when he sees his prom date in her dress. It was enchanting. I'm not even going to bother dissecting all of the cliched speeches and bullshit everyone was spewing during this dinner. My focus was primarily on the food. I felt personally attacked by the lack of carbs on that table. Although that explains why these human prizes are never bloated and always look incredible. I wish I had the willpower to tolerate living on a diet of salad, protein, and oranges, but 90% of my joy in life comes from thinking about what I'm having for dinner. Something that made me sad was hearing Auntie talk about her friendship with Lorenzo during her speech. I would have loved to have watched more of them. Now, when it comes to the dumping, I have to give it to the public. They made the right decision, and we're losing Priya and Aiden. Now, he has firmly remained one of my nemeses throughout his time in the show, but thank God for this pairing. They brought so much mess to this villa, and this season would have been an even bigger drag without them. And that takes us into Sunday's episode, where we get to watch them mourn the loss of Priya and Aiden for about 10 minutes before it's time to prepare for the next dumping. And it takes up the whole episode because the ex-Islanders are back and now it's their time to desperately claw for another moment of relevance. This series has been so overcrowded with irrelevant people, so it did take a second for me to jog my memory and put a name to some of these faces. This was like a really shit remake of the fight scene where they all come together in Avengers Endgame. It was just such a barrage of people I don't even care about apart from Ellie and Mara. And I guess it was nice to see Opie again. It feels like a lifetime since I last saw him and Robin. I think that the best way to get through this is to just go through each Islander, their vote for who to dump, and I'll cover any other thoughts. First up is Opie, and I still think it was an excellent decision for him to get out of this villa when he did, in order to prevent any more PR nightmares. He kept it very civil and classy, and made the correct choice to dump Yasmin and Tommy. Truly, if we're being honest, there's no other choice since we found out about his girl at home. Next up is Lola, who to no one's surprise picks Yulia and Lorenzo. Yeah, that feud is never dying, and obviously their relationship is a recipe for disaster, but at this stage I'm judging anyone who didn't pick Yaz and Tommy. Then we have Tommy Toon, and seeing him again has made me firmly decide that he's an even grosser romantic prospect than Aiden. He's icky, and I need to make a public service announcement to any girl going to his club appearances. Please do not sleep with this man, he's nasty. Ultimately, he picks Mika and Samraj, and damn, Samraj is definitely the most defensive and combative when anyone votes against him and Mika. I genuinely worry for him because reality TV and a career in influencing isn't the best choice for someone who is very thin-skinned with a fragile ego. For his sake, he needs to move on from this experience as soon as possible. He keeps talking about how him and Mika will still be together in 2 years, and even trying to call Yulia and Lorenzo out as the more sensible option to vote for. Ugh, this is hard to watch, but I guess it is more entertaining to watch people who are honest and will go for the low road. Although I have to say that even Yulia has learned to be diplomatic and just take the votes on the chin. Next up is Robin, who is one of the ex-villagers who made the least sense. She provided an excellent argument for why Yaz and Tommy should be leaving, because this guy definitely applied to the show with a girlfriend, but then chooses to dump Mika and Samraj because she doesn't understand how you can go from friends to lovers. Clearly, Robin hasn't wasted as much time as I have reading silly little romance novels, because it happens a lot more often than you think, especially if you play ice hockey. Then we have Sam, and wow, this was a blast from the past. He's the same person who doesn't belong on reality TV, so I wasn't surprised that he made the sensible choice to vote for Yasmin and Tommy. He's followed by Geordie Tina, who makes the same decision, and as soon as an Islander leaves the villa, they are basically wiped from my brain, but I do think she deserves a second chance. She brings an old school OG energy, so it was good to see her again. One of the biggest surprises for me was Chidi, a man who I definitely thought left before his time, but then hearing him vote for Jasmine and Cavan due to the power dynamic, I don't know about this. It was painting some manosphere red flags in my brain. Maybe his issue is with the age gap and isn't due to Jasmine being a pretty assertive woman, but it wasn't a good look on him. Next, we have Charleen, who has rolled in looking like Jojo Siwa in her bad girl era, and she is on her high horse banging on about Mika calling her that girl, and Jasmine mocking the clip of her from After Sun. Tiny Tears Charleen really wants to frame herself as the permanent victim. I can't deal with her hypocrisy, and they're really trying to sweep Yulia calling Jasmine a bitch, and all of the shadiness from the Casa girls under the rug. She votes for Jasmine and Cavan, which is what we all expected. Up next is Ethan, a man who I completely forgot existed, and he only left last week. I cannot remember what he did for a living, but hearing all his talk about logistics has convinced me that he works in supply chain management. He's worried about the commute that Mika and Samarash will have, so he votes for them. And Ethan is an actual adult, so this one is one of the least personal votes, and he was borderline emotionless, but still this triggered Samraj to get defensive. Now, I definitely don't think that he and Mika deserve all these votes, but hearing him be such a little bitch about this process could potentially motivate me to switch things up and choose to dump them instead, if I was one of the ex-Islanders. Then we have Alicia, and sidebar, but I need to give a round of applause to Yulia. She might be the savviest game player here. By taking up the position as chief bombshell defender, she has definitely managed to secure safety for her and Lorenzo, and we can definitely expect to see her strategy picked up in future series. Now, Alicia is another one who was being very self-righteous and tries to call Mika out for laughing at Priya job-shaming her. This is such a reach, and now Mika is having to apologise for such unnecessary shit. Things are definitely being blown out of proportion, and the only girl I think that Mika was out of line with was Priya. This has just all gotten very personal, and they're not even pretending to vote for compatibility anymore, so Alicia picks Mika and Samraj. I don't like her. I find her insufferable, and she should be focusing her attention on shutting down her dad's insane rants on social media. Finley also picks Mika and Samraj due to them being at the bottom of votes. So many of these people have no backbone and are just trying to pander for public support. Newsflash, Finley. The public already doesn't fuck with you. And I'm very excited for 99% of these people to fade back to obscurity. When it came time for Hallie's turn, I genuinely was starting to think the production was trying to troll us and just bringing in random people they found at the airport. She also votes for Mika and Samraj, but at least she tries to be kind and doesn't make an absolute tit of herself. Next up is Mara, who looks stunning with some fresh highlights. I forgot how soothing her voice is, and the cam app needs to sign her up for some bedtime stories ASAP. She votes for Jasmine and Kevin due to her doubting his sincerity based on how he acted at the sleepover and at Casa. Now, Kav of course gets defensive, despite Jasmine doing her best to rein him in, but this guy cannot tolerate hearing anything other than praise. He's another boy with a fragile ego. Then we have the beautiful Victoria, and it has been a rough showing for Ireland this year, but I guess she'd have to be our best representative. She's always been level-headed, so naturally she picks Yaz and Tommy, and it is beyond wild that anyone else is even getting votes after that podcast interview. I get that they all have personal beefs, but you think the guy with a girlfriend should be in the final? Jordan is another sheep who is making his decision based on the public voting results, so he chooses Mika and Samraj. Now, from what I remember, Jordan was another one of the Islanders who had a girlfriend at home, so of course he's naturally going to support Tommy's position. Now, if there's one person I knew I could rely on, it had to be Mibs, who is a no-nonsense lady, so she of course votes for Yaz and Tommy. Justice for Namibia, I need her to be given a second chance, and Lorenzo looked happier to see her than he's ever looked with Yulia. Another friendship I would have loved to have seen more of. Next up is Fitzy, who doesn't have a mind of his own, so no doubt due to Lola's influence, he is joining her in voting for Yulia and Lorenzo, to which Yulia tells him to kiss her ass. Fair. Then we have Ellie, our would-be winner if she had extracted herself from that waste man. Now, I've never been convinced that she's like Yaz, so I do question if there's some personal element here, but outside of romance, she makes excellent decisions, so there's another vote for Yaz and Tommy. The final voter is Marfa, and my main takeaway is that she should wear her hair curly more often. She looked stunning. She sticks the final nail in the coffin and votes for Mika and Samraj, resulting in them being dumped from the island. And I guess this is payback for Samraj making out with her and then ditching her in Casa. So the final tally was 8 votes for Mika and Samraj, 6 votes for Yaz and Tommy, 3 votes for Jasmine and Kevin, 2 votes for Yulia and Lorenzo, and none for Angie and Simba. That's wild how they managed to get by without a single vote after all of Simba's madness. Good for them. Anyway, it's been a long time coming, so bye-bye Mika and Samraj. It was a little harsh that they had a pack on their own, but they are given a little twist. They will be picking another couple to go home with them. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. This limits the voting window to just Monday night, and now we'll have a free couple final. I guess production is ready to call the time of death on this series. And that takes us to the final episode, and straight out the gate, I have a bone to pick with production. Now, I get that they've tried to shake things up by adding in this podcast challenge and this ridiculous decision for the 5th place couple to drag the 4th place couple out with them. But I have to say that I really missed some of the final week traditions that have been stripped. Where are the babies? And more importantly, where is my talent show? It's always shit, but I get sentimental over this stuff and wanted to see who would badly play an instrument this year. I honestly don't think they'll ever replicate this whole 4th place couple elimination and having just a final 3. My conspiracy theory is that production had an agenda and they really wanted Yaz and Tommy to be removed as a result of the ex-Islander vote. But those fuckers all went rogue and had their own grudges, so picked Mika and Samraj instead. It seems like they didn't want Tommy to be anywhere near that final due to the ex-girlfriend stuff, although he's far from the first Islander to do this. Anyway, when it's time for Mika and Samraj to choose the other couple to leave, they select Yaz and Tommy. And I guess it's possible Mika and Samraj were trying to reduce any further public backlash, but I still think that if left to their own devices, they would have chosen to dump Yulia and Lorenzo. Anyway, it's now time for us to see our finalists, and it is like a funeral. The terrible vibes this year continue, and everyone is wearing black or white. I will say that Angie looks ridiculously stunning. It's historic, and something that I will think about for years to come. Other than that, the outfits were pretty meh, and my only comment is on the amount of makeup that they applied to Simba. He is a star, so of course he needed to be ready for his big camera moment. I feel like Lorenzo had quite a bit of a touch-up too, and poor Calvin, he desperately needed some powder. He was looking very shiny under all of these bright lights. Now, if I had to pick a least favourite episode every year, it would have to be the final. Not just because that's when the melancholy and mourning starts to kick in, but also because it's very boring with a lot of filler and interviews with the Islanders saying nothing of value. So I'm going to keep things pretty brief. Maya sits down with Mika and Samraj, which consists of them talking about being in love and Mika making that shrill, squeaky noise she makes when she's excited. At least they managed to give Samraj some quick media training, so he managed to pretend that he wasn't salty about the ex-Islanders' decision to dump them. Next we have Yaz and Tommy, and they're both dressed in white, and both Mika and Samraj are dressed in black. And I'm guessing that it was a production choice to keep everyone in monochrome to create a classy aesthetic, but it was boring visually. Anyway, these two are planning their first date and sweeping those girlfriend at home rumours under the rug. Mika mentions that Lorenzo is going to share his list of good restaurants with them, and I'm going to need a copy of this too. I have made a lot of to-do lists for restaurants that I want to go to, so would be more than happy to add on some Lorenzo-approved establishments. Now it's time for Maya to circulate around and talk to some of the other ex-Islanders. First up is Priya and Aiden, and God help them, but I think they've shagged again and are going to try to delay the time of death in this relationship. Priya also gives an apology to Alicia for the National Rail comments and manages to nip this drama in the bud pretty swiftly. We also learn that Alicia and Ethan are exploring, and I guess good for them. I feel like over the years, a lot of Islanders have expressed interest in the bombshell who came in with them, but obviously they're not really allowed to pick each other, so at least they can hook up now. I'm not very hopeful for this being a long-term thing, but good for them, and the same goes for Ellie and Finley, who are talking about how happy they are together. Whatever, this show is making me cynical. Oh, and Charleen. I don't think I've ever seen a bigger downward spiral than hers. She was so hyped coming into this villa. Her time in there was kind of a flop. She's been pretty bitter since, and now she's kissing Tommy Toon. She clearly didn't hear my public service announcement, but what are you doing, woman? She could have picked any other dumped man from this year, and it would have been a better option. Oh, this is a new low, and I was rooting for you, Charleen. Kissing this man off camera. I hope that Tommy is just lying for the attention, because this is bleak. But still not as dark as having to watch Fitzy's pigeon impression. I get that they need to fill time so that the audience can vote for a winner, but between this and all of the montages, this final was a hate crime. Eventually, we find out that the third place couple is Angie and Simba, and they will always be number one in my heart. They have another generic interview with Maya, and my only note was that I would love to join their families for bottomless brunch. Then it's time to talk to the other finalists, and Lorenzo has everything given to him so easily. During his time in the villa, he talked about his dream girl, Saskia, and then Yulia came in and matched his fantasy exactly. Now, I have to say, I wasn't really feeling much of a connection when I was watching these two, or Jasmine and Calvin for that matter, when they were being interviewed. Maybe they're all very nervous, but my only takeaways are that Lorenzo will never love Yulia in the way that he loves Tommy Toon, and that Jasmine definitely doesn't want Aiden to date her sister. Then finally, it is time to announce our winners, and personally, I didn't feel any suspense during this. Throughout the series, they've kept us informed on who the most popular Islanders are, and from the start, Lorenzo has had a lot of support. So the 50k and first place position, of course, went to Yulia and Lorenzo. And that wraps up the final week of Love Island UK. This has been an emotional journey, and I can't believe it's already coming to an end. I'll be back next Wednesday and launching a new series where I'll be watching The Real Housewives of Orange County from the beginning in celebration of its 20-year anniversary. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you liked what you heard here, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify or YouTube, and consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps new people find it. You can also find me on Instagram at PopMonsterPod, and please DM me if you have any ideas for things you'd like me to cover in future episodes. Again, thank you guys so much and have a wonderful rest of your day.